Hello, I'm Kiertoslav with Historical Fiction, and today I'm looking at a very popular author, particularly in terms of sci-fi and fantasy, one that probably anyone watching this has heard of before, Edgar Rice Burroughs. If you don't know who he is, then you'll know his most famous creations because he's very famous for creating Tarzan and the Princess of Mars, the Barsoom series, and so on there. So I won't spend a lot of time talking about him because there are other people who can document his life and his career much better than me. But he was one of the writers who I read quite a bit of, got me into kind of fantasy, and I've read, I think I've read a fair amount of his work overall. Today, I'm going to take a look at one of his lesser known novels there, because I actually do tend to prefer his lesser known novels there, which is one of the reasons. By the way, I've made the background here is just some art books from Stephen E. Fabian. He did some of the artwork he did some Tarzan artwork and so on there. So I thought he was appropriate. Just because this cover, I don't have the dust jacket for this book because it's quite old there. In fact, I would take a quick look at it. This copy is one of my older copies that I've got. I have to be a bit careful with it. See if I can get a copyright date on there. So 1933. So yeah, so this one's a bit old. It's seen a bit of wear and tear over the years, but I really enjoy old books overall, especially as I'm not a actual collector there. I just like to have some. I think they look nice in my collection there. But yeah, back to the story. I'm a fan of Edgar Rice Burroughs, but like some of my other writers, I'm not a huge fan. My favorite work isn't his most popular, his most famous work. Well, I like Tarzan. I've read a bit of the Tarzan there. It's not my favorite. And same thing with the Princess of Mars. I think I've read one or two books in that series, and well, I like them. They didn't really inspire me to read the rest. It's one of the things I've noticed about my reading habits is that oftentimes the most popular character made by a writer is not always my most favorite work from them. So, for example, with I mentioned before, Harold Lamb is one of my favorite authors, but his most famous character, Click the Cossack, is not. It's not among my favorite works of his, or with Robert E. Howard. I like his Conan stories, but I actually like some of his other stories better. And in the same token, I actually think Edward Rice Burroughs. I liked him a bit more when he was writing about these uh, kind of one-off characters. There, I think that those it might just be I'm a little bit less inclined toward long-term like characters who go on multiple adventures. I tend to find them less believable. I think most of us, we have one or two big adventures in our life, and the rest of our lives are not that adventurous there. So I think that's possibly one reason. Sometimes the amount of adventures that some characters like Click the Cossack went on were just it just stretched my imagination to imagine that he could be in that many adventures, particularly in his old age. But anyway, the story behind this one, The Jungle Girl, is the title of the book. I'd actually found that the original title that Burroughs wanted was apparently The Dancing Girl and the Leper King, which I think is just so much better title there, which I wish they would have gone with. But apparently, this novel was originally serialized in some adventure magazines there, and it does read slightly like a serialized story where it's got occasional recaps and it's very episodic there. But that's perfectly fine. It was collected into this volume. I think this is a first printing there um, for this one in the UK at least. And the story, it's got one of the, I would say, kind of standard type of Burroughs protagonists. He's a kind of a modern American man who goes, fairly well off, fairly wealthy, who goes on holiday to Cambodia there, and the entire adventure takes place in Cambodia. And I've got kind of a soft spot for that part of the world. I used to live in Southeast Asia, more than 25 years ago, so that part of the world's got a bit of a soft spot for me. So I never actually got managed to get to Cambodia, but but I know the area well. It's one of the reasons it's called Jungle Girl, because it takes place in kind of a jungle kingdom there. And this in the very first chapter, he's got a Cambodian guide, and he's going into the forest, and he wants to go and explore the area where the Khmers. I'm not sure about the pronunciation on that because I've never actually heard it pronounced out loud, but Khmers. So lived originally. It's kind of a haunted area, and he takes his rifle and heads off and says he'll be back before dark. And his Cambodian guide says, "You will never come out," which actually, of course, proves to be prophetic there, because what happens, of course, to Gordon King is that he travels into the wilderness, and it seems like he falls through some kind of time hole or time gap. There's a question as to whether he travels through time and also to another kind of universe there, or if he just goes back in our time. I would probably say it's probably going back in our time period, because there's nothing fantastical or magical about the land that he goes back to, but he goes back to kind of an ancient. I don't know enough about Cambodian history to know exactly when he goes, but I would say it's kind of sometime in, roughly between 600 1000 AD there, which is just a random guess based on absolutely no evidence. Um, but yeah, and he winds up, of course, encountering an ancient kingdom there, which is ruled by a leper king. And apparently, in the legends of Cambodia, there are legends of a king who was a leper there. Of course, he's a bit evil, and he goes on, I'd say, some standard adventures there. Of course, the jungle girl that he falls in love with is a Cambodian girl who comes to help him, and so on there. And I say it's a good adventure there. Nothing earth shattering there. It does have the kind of common trope that Burroughs often had, where he would take a modern man, a modern character, and put him into an extreme situation, and he would somehow excel. For example, with Tarzan, it actually made sense, because Tarzan, grew up and was raised in the jungle, so it would make sense that he would excel in a jungle setting. But this guy, Gordon King, who's kind of a rich polo playing American, to suddenly be extremely successful in ancient Cambodia, does stretch the imagination a bit. But I know that was of the time there. The idea there that the modern man was kind of superior to the savages there. But it does actually do a good job of representing. It has heroic and good uh, Cambodians, or Khmer there. I think they call the other town is Lodi Hapura there. And I'm sure there's actually some history about it. I'm not, as I said, I haven't done any research on that time period or anything like that. But overall, I think it's quite a nice book. I say it's probably one of my favorite Edgar Rice Burroughs books, along with a few others of his standalone series, like Monster Men and Cave Girl and other ones like that. I tend to find those the most readable of his material. So I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for listening.